The use of computer graphics in film traces its origins all the way to Hitchcock's Vertigo in 1958, where computers were used to create the opening title sequence. The following decades would see gradual improvements in CGI, with movies like Westworld and the original Star Wars, but computers wouldn't really start hitting the Hollywood mainstream until the 1980s, with Tron setting a high bar that would eventually be cleared by James Cameron's pioneering effects teams on 1989's The Abyss, and again in 1991's Terminator 2 Judgment Day.
Get out.
With a handful of other landmark films along the way, like Flight of the Navigator and Young Sherlock Holmes. Still, CGI had many detractors in Hollywood, with most concluding that it would have very limited utility, and others worried that it would replace practical effects artists with soulless algorithms and uncanny abominations. As 1993 dawned, there were few people in the business who could see the near limitless potential of computer graphics, but by the end of the summer, they would get all the proof they'd need to change their minds forever.
Just beyond the shores of Costa Rica, an island called Isla Nublar is host to a grand experiment funded by a wealthy industrialist, John Hammond, who has used cutting-edge genetic science to bring dinosaurs back to life for a zoo-like amusement park he calls Jurassic Park. Before he can reveal his latest endeavor to the public, however, blood-sucking lawyers insist that he invite an exclusive group of experts to examine the place and determine its safety. The radical mathematician Ian Malcolm, the paleobotanist Ellie Sattler, and the world's premier paleontologist, Dr. Alan Grant. While initially awed by what Hammond has created, it isn't long before they start to see the flaws in the park's very conception, and they come face to face with the raw fury of extinction.
Dinosaurs have always been encoded into the DNA of the Hollywood blockbuster, going as far back as the very first blockbuster, King Kong, in 1993, and maybe even further back with the likes of 1925's The Lost World. These massive prehistoric creatures have held a unique fascination in our collective consciousness ever since the field of paleontology exploded in the early 19th century. But since we have never really been able to figure out exactly how they looked or behaved in the flesh, they've tantalized us with the unknown, forcing us to activate our imaginations to comprehend what they must have been like. That, naturally, offers a perfect opening for storytellers of all kinds. Enter Michael Crichton, the famed science fiction writer and filmmaker behind Westworld, The Andromeda Strain, and Coma, all previous subjects of this channel. In 1974, Crichton wrote about dinosaurs and paleontology in a novel called Dragon Teeth, which wouldn't get published until after his death. And by the 1980s, Crichton was intrigued by the idea of genetically recreating dinosaurs from dormant DNA. He took the idea to real-life geneticists and other scientists, who told him it wasn't outside the realm of plausibility, given recent advancements in the field. In 1983, Crichton penned a screenplay on the subject, which was about a single pterosaur created by an academic, but later decided it would work better as a novel, and that the expense of genetic engineering would require a more capitalist motivation within the story, namely a theme park.
Really spectacular, spared no expense.
With a heaping spoonful of Westworld and a dash of chaos theory thrown into the mix, the story basically wrote itself. While Crichton was still working on the novel that would become by far his most successful, he was working with producer-director Steven Spielberg on the conception of a TV show that would eventually become ER when he described Jurassic Park. Spielberg was immediately taken with it and began lobbying with Universal to purchase the movie rights, the price of which Crichton had set at $1.5 million in addition to a percentage of the box office gross. Tim Burton, Joe Dante, and Richard Donner, through their various studios, were also lobbying for the rights, and all four studios were willing to meet Crichton's asking price. This wasn't a bidding war so much as Crichton getting to choose which studio he wanted to work with. Universal and Spielberg ultimately won, but the studio heads at Universal stipulated that Spielberg, who wanted to move directly from his current project at the time, Hook, into Schindler's List, would have to do Jurassic Park first. So he got to work, storyboarding scenes straight from the novel before the script was finished. Michael Crichton wrote the first draft of the screenplay, which was then rewritten by Malia Scotch-Marmo, the same writer who had done the screenplay for Hook, and then again by David Koepp, whose stellar career was just getting off the ground. The final draft, with heavy involvement from Spielberg, made significant changes from the novel, including reworking the characters and removing some of the more terrifying scenes. Spielberg wisely intuited that kids would be drawn to the movie, and he didn't want to lean into the horror as much as Crichton had, choosing instead to focus on the dinosaurs as animals rather than just monsters. Over the course of 2 years, pre-production focused heavily on the question of how exactly they were going to bring realistic-looking dinosaurs to the big screen. A killer quartet of effects supervisors was made up of Phil Tippett, Stan Winston, Dennis Muren, and Michael Lantieri. Spielberg's original vision was to create all of the dinosaurs full size, but this was obviously impractical for various reasons. Therefore, Phil Tippett was in charge of using state-of-the-art go motion, a style of blurred stop-motion that had had great success throughout the 80s. But Spielberg wasn't happy with initial tests, convinced they didn't look real enough. ILM then put together a few tests to see if computer graphics could be used instead for some of the wide shots and action sequences. And though Spielberg wasn't fully convinced the technology was up to the task, he made the executive decision to nix the go motion in favor of CGI. Tippett, whose complaint to Spielberg that CGI was threatening to make him extinct actually made its way into the script.
So what are you thinking?
We're out of a job. Don't you mean extinct?
Was disheartened by the decision at first, but Spielberg kept him in charge of overseeing the visual effects alongside Dennis Muren. ILM also kept Tippett and his team of physical animators in the loop as valuable assets that were not only useful, but, as it turned out, necessary to making the CGI move convincingly. Early plans were much smaller in scope than the final film would wind up being. As pre-production moved along, and even well into the filming process, Spielberg and the effects team continued coming up with ways to improve and expand upon those plans, including changing the climax to include the triumphant return of the T-Rex, something that nobody would have thought possible at the start. Despite how crucial the CGI is to the final film, not to mention how the film would become a major turning point in the history of computer graphics, the physical effects were no less groundbreaking, with Stan Winston Studios putting everything they had into realizing the many physical dinosaurs. Chief among these is the aforementioned T-Rex in the film's most technically challenging sequence, in which it attacks our characters in their tour trucks as a major tropical storm flares up around them. The water continuously weighed down the already 12,000-pound T-Rex animatronic, resulting in a lot of downtime in which crew would literally towel the beast down. According to Michael Lantieri, however, the hardest shot of the entire movie was also one of the most iconic and simple: the rippling cups of water that precede the T-Rex. Spielberg claims he had the idea while stopped at a red light in his car, watching his face vibrate in a rearview mirror as he had Earth, Wind, and Fire cranked up on his radio. After a lot of trial and error and many phone calls to sound experts, physicists, and wave tank technicians, Lantieri finally figured out he could achieve Spielberg's desired perfect circles with nothing more complicated than a taut guitar string hidden beneath the dashboard. Also consulted from very early on was famed paleontologist Jack Horner, the real-life basis for the character of Alan Grant. Horner attempted to lend authenticity to the entire film, and he did succeed to a certain degree. There are some inaccuracies he pointed out to no avail, however, like the fact that the T-Rex was more of a scavenger than a hunter, that dinosaurs were likely brightly colored, and that they probably didn't roar. All in all, though, I think Spielberg was respectful of the science, but he knew when to let artistic liberty override accuracy. Indeed, the whole premise of the story, though rooted in some good science, is nowhere near as plausible as Crichton would have you believe, given that DNA degrades relatively quickly, even in fossilized amber. While we're stopped, I just want to quickly remind you to hit that like button, and if you really do like this video, hit that subscribe as well. Your support really makes this channel possible, so please, if you like what I'm doing and you want to see more, consider joining my Patreon to get access to bonus content, vote on future topics, and more. If you want to see even more from me, I'm also the co-host of a couple of different podcasts, the Streaming HEAP and From Here to Paternity, which are available wherever you get your podcasts, and I have a novel called Paradox that is available through Amazon. If all else fails, though, you can always check out my website at emcgill.com, where you'll find written reviews of plenty more sci-fi classics in both film and literature. Now then, with all that shameless self-promotion out of the way, let's move on. When it came to casting the film, Spielberg knew he needed naturalistic, believable actors, more than he needed big-name star power. He wanted the actors to help ground the movie in as much realism as possible, to help sell the effects and the fantasy. Many actors were considered for the lead role of Dr. Grant, including Harrison Ford, William Hurt, Tim Robbins, and Richard Dreyfuss, before it went to the Irish/New Zealander/Australian character actor Sam Neill, who had appeared in a handful of notable American films like The Omen 3 and The Hunt for Red October.
And I will live in Montana. And I will marry a round American woman and raise rabbits, and she will cook them for me.
To play his partner Ellie, Spielberg's first choice had always been Laura Dern, but other actors did audition and were considered, including Robin Wright, Helen Hunt, and the great Juliette Binoche. The eccentric Ian Malcolm was almost played by a not yet quite famous Jim Carrey, but it was decided that Jeff Goldblum, who had appeared alongside Carrey in Earth Girls Are Easy, more closely resembled the character from the book.
Life, finds a way.
As for the pivotal John Hammond, creator of the titular park, Spielberg wanted somebody a little larger than life, and Sean Connery was considered before the role went to Lord Richard Attenborough, a veteran actor and director who hadn't actually appeared in a feature film since 1979's The Human Factor, and who happens to be the older brother of noted naturalist David Attenborough. The kids, Tim and Lex, are played by Joseph Mazzello and Ariana Richards, respectively. Mazzello had auditioned for Spielberg's previous film, Hook, and though he didn't get the part, Spielberg had promised to get him a part in a future project. Richards won her role, beating out the likes of Christina Ricci, in large part because her taped scream was the only one to get the attention of Spielberg's wife, Kate Capshaw. Other notable actors include Samuel L. Jackson as Arnold,
Hold on to your butts.
B.D. Wong as Wu, Bob Peck as Muldoon,
Clever girl.
Martin Ferrero as the lawyer Gennaro, and Wayne Knight as Nedry.
Yeah, that's nice. Gotta go.
Spielberg himself cameos right at the start, and producer Jerry Mullen plays Dr. Harding, the guy treating the Triceratops. Filming on Jurassic Park began in August of 1992 on the island of Kauai, where Hurricane Iniki actually proved fortuitous in filming some of the storm sequences. It did destroy at least one important set, however, forcing Arnold's death scene to be cut from the film, much to Samuel Jackson's disappointment. After 3 weeks of filming in Hawaii, production moved to California for a couple of days of filming in Red Rock Canyon State Park before finishing on various sound stages at Universal. The shoot ended in late November, a full 12 days ahead of schedule and several $1 million under the $60 million production budget. Jurassic Park released exactly 30 years ago today, on June 11, 1993. Critical reviews were mostly positive, praising the film's spectacle and ambition, and it would come out of the gate breaking box office records left and right. In its initial worldwide run, it grossed $914 million, making it the top-grossing film to date until James Cameron's Titanic would take the title in 1998. Not to mention the $1 billion it made in promotional deals and the $500 million Jurassic Park made on its home video release, after an extensive $65 million marketing campaign. That number, 65 million, is a fitting one given how long ago dinosaurs went extinct. Add on an additional $150 million for television distribution, and Jurassic Park made more than $2.5 billion in total, and that doesn't even account for the movie's multiple re-releases. You don't need me to tell you what a massive cultural impact Jurassic Park has had. I mean, it's Jurassic Park. It has 5 sequels, is a major part of Universal Studios theme parks, has been adapted into various other media like video games, comic books, and animated TV shows, and continues to be a merchandising juggernaut today. It is still alive and well, of course, and though no concrete plans for its future have been announced following the last feature film in the series, Jurassic World Dominion, it probably won't be long before Hammond's dinosaurs grace our theater screens once more in one way or another. As I've already said, Jurassic Park also marks a significant milestone in computer graphics, where the whole idea of CGI in film finally moved out of its infancy, finally learned to walk and mature into what it is today. Not only did Jurassic Park prove that CGI could be used to great effect where traditional effects struggle, it also proved that, rather than depriving men like Phil Tippett of jobs, it opened up the field to even more artists and technicians, expanding the scope for what is possible and affirming the need for the human artist every step of the way. As for me, let me just start by acknowledging that I was perhaps a little misguided when I listed anything other than Jurassic Park as my favorite film of 1993 a while back when I did my Every Year a Movie special. I won't apologize for it, that would go against my brand, but I will say if I had the chance to do it again, I probably wouldn't make the same choices. That's because Jurassic Park is a near-perfect movie. I can't look at it without my nostalgia goggles on because it released at the prime age, when I was 14 years old and had spent most of those years telling people I wanted to be a paleontologist when I grew up. I was obsessed with Crichton's novel, was in love with both Spielberg and movies in general, and had my expectations set absurdly high by the time I finally dragged my family into the theater with me on opening night. Okay, maybe they came willingly, but I was still the most enthusiastic one there. Watching it now as an adult and as a parent, I respect how well Spielberg was able to walk that fine line to make a movie that is, at its heart, a horror film, but one that is relatively safe for general audiences and able to entertain both everyday families and snobby movie critics. One clever way he does this is by breaking the most terrifying sequences with subtle gags like Malcolm having to wipe the fog from the windscreen while children are nearly eaten by a T-Rex. It also stays true to Spielberg's storytelling, one that has always put interpersonal relationships and family before just about everything else. For example, the character of Dr. Grant is changed from the book to now have to work through his aversion to children, and to have to deal with jealousy over how Malcolm tries to make the move on Dr. Sattler. But don't mistake me, Spielberg doesn't sacrifice Crichton's core themes of Frankenstein-style science run amok or how life and chaos will always win in the end. Sure, the movie is a bit on the saccharine side, which can turn some people off, and sure, its sequels don't even come close to living up to it, but you absolutely cannot argue that Jurassic Park is anything but a sci-fi classic. And that's all for today, my fellow Earthlings. What's your favorite on-screen dinosaur? Let me know in the comments, and while you're there, don't forget to like and subscribe if you haven't already. Thank you for watching, and until next time, when we'll discuss one of the earliest examples of artificial intelligence taking over the US military, this is the Unapologetic Geek, telling you to never be ashamed of what you love, as long as you're not hurting anybody.